If you ask the average American whether they will run out of money in retirement, most of them will say yes. They will tell you they are worried, they are behind, and they do not see how their savings will last. But here is what is interesting. When you actually look at the data, when you look at what real retirees are experiencing right now, the picture looks very different, and the numbers might surprise you. Today, we are going to break down the real reason you probably will not run out of money in retirement. Not based on opinion, not based on fear, but based on data from the Federal Reserve, the Employee Benefit Research Institute, Vanguard, and the Social Security Administration itself. I am Norix Hale, and this is Federal Benefit Guide. Let's get into it. So here's the core finding that most people miss. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent report on the economic well-being of U.S. households, which was published in May 2025 and covers data from 2024, 82% of all retirees said they were doing okay or living comfortably financially. 82%. That is not a small number. That is the vast majority of retired Americans saying that, despite all the headlines about a retirement crisis, they are actually managing. Now, this does not mean everything is perfect. We will get to the challenges in a moment. But the point is this: the fear of running out of money in retirement is widespread. But the actual experience of running out of money is far less common than people think. And there are specific structural reasons for that. Let's walk through them one by one. Before we go further, let me be transparent about where this information is coming from, because I want you to be able to verify everything I say. The Federal Reserve publishes the Survey of Household Economics and Decision-Making every year. The 2024 version, released in May 2025, is the most recent full report available. The Employee Benefit Research Institute, or EBRI, along with Greenwald Research, runs the Retirement Confidence Survey. The 2026 edition was released in April 2026, and it is the longest-running survey of its kind in the country. Vanguard publishes an annual report called How America Saves. The 2026 edition, which is their 25th anniversary report, looks at the behavior of nearly 5 million American workers in defined contribution retirement plans. And the Social Security Administration, through its Board of Trustees, releases an annual report on the financial health of the Social Security Trust Funds. The most recent was issued in June 2026. These are not opinion blogs. These are institutions that collect data directly from real Americans and publish their findings publicly. Reason 1, multiple income sources. So, reason number 1, why most retirees do not run out of money. It comes down to income diversity. Most retirees do not rely on just one source of money. They have several. According to the Federal Reserve's report, Social Security is the most common source of retirement income, received by 78% of retirees overall, and by 91% of retirees age 65 or older. But here is the key part. 81% of retirees also had one or more sources of private income beyond Social Security. Specifically, 56% had income from a pension, 50% had interest, dividends, or rental income, and 32% had some form of labor income, meaning they were still earning wages or self-employment income even in retirement. So when you hear someone say, "What if Social Security runs out?" remember this. Social Security is one leg of the stool, but it is not the only leg for most retirees. The majority have additional income streams working alongside it. And this matters because even if one source is reduced, the others can help fill the gap. Reason number 2 is something that most retirement calculators do not properly account for. Research consistently shows that retirement spending tends to decrease over time, not stay flat. A study highlighted by the Employee Benefit Research Institute's Spending in Retirement Survey found that retiree spending often follows what researchers call a U-shaped pattern. Retirees tend to spend more in the early years of retirement, when they are more active and traveling. and then spending gradually declines as they age. This is sometimes called the retirement spending smile. Higher at the beginning, lower in the middle, and then it may rise slightly at the very end due to healthcare costs. But the overall trend is clear. Most retirees spend less in their later retirement years than they did in their first few years. And there is another layer to this. Research published by financial planning expert Michael Kitches found that many retirees do not even spend down their principal. They spend only the income generated by their portfolios, things like dividends and interest, plus their guaranteed income sources like Social Security and pensions. In other words, a lot of retirees are actually underspending. They have more money than they need, but they are afraid to spend it because they are worried about the future. Now, underspending is not necessarily a good thing. It can mean people are depriving themselves of a comfortable retirement out of fear. But it does tell us something important. Running out of money is not the typical outcome for most retirees. Reason number 3. Social Security provides a guaranteed income floor that never runs out, regardless of what happens to the trust funds. Let me explain what I mean by that, because there is a lot of confusion here. Every year, the Social Security Board of Trustees releases a report on the financial status of the program. In the 2026 report, released in June, the trustees projected that the combined trust funds, meaning the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Fund, plus the Disability Insurance Fund, will be depleted by 2034. If you look at the retiree fund alone, the OASI fund, the projected depletion date is the fourth quarter of 2032. Now that sounds alarming. But here is what depletion actually means. It does not mean Social Security goes to zero. It does not mean payments stop. What it means is that the trust fund reserves, which have been building up since the 1980s reforms, will be used up. After that, the program will rely solely on incoming payroll tax revenue. According to AARP's analysis of the trustees' report, once the trust funds are depleted, annual revenue will cover approximately 83% of scheduled benefits for the combined funds. For the OASI fund alone, it would cover about 78%. So even in a worst-case scenario where Congress does nothing, Social Security would still pay out roughly 3/4 or more of promised benefits. That is a reduction, yes, but it is not a collapse. And here is the most important point. Social Security is a pay-as-you-go system. As long as workers are paying payroll taxes, there is money flowing into the program. That means Social Security will continue to provide a monthly check for the rest of your life, no matter how long you live. That is what makes it fundamentally different from a savings account. A savings account can hit zero. Social Security cannot. It is backed by the ongoing payroll taxes of every working American. Now, I want to be clear. Congress should act to shore up the program well before 2034. The sooner they act, the more gradual any changes can be, and the more time workers have to adjust. AARP, the Brookings Institution, and the Government Accountability Office have all emphasized this point. But the idea that Social Security will simply vanish is not supported by the data. Even the trustees' own projections show continued payments, just at a reduced level if no action is taken. Reason number 4. The next generation of retirees is actually saving more than previous generations did. Vanguard's 2026 How America Saves Report, their 25th anniversary edition, looked at the behavior of nearly 5 million American workers in defined contribution plans. And the findings were genuinely encouraging. Participation in retirement plans climbed to a record 86% among eligible employees. That is up from 65% 25 years ago. This increase is largely driven by the widespread adoption of automatic enrollment. The average savings rate reached 12.1%, which is an all-time high. 45% of participants increased their savings rate in 2025 alone. The average account balance was $167,970 as of year-end 2025. The median balance was $44,115, which is a 16% increase from the previous year. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. The median is much lower than the average, and that tells us there is a wide gap between high savers and low savers. That is absolutely true, and it is a real concern that we will address. But the trend is moving in the right direction. More people are participating, more people are increasing their contributions, and employer matching contributions have risen to a record 4.7%. Nearly 70% of participants now use professionally managed allocations, which means their investments are being handled more wisely than if they were picking individual stocks on their own. And here is a particularly strong signal. Only 5% of participants made trades during periods of market volatility. That means the vast majority of savers are staying the course, not panicking, and letting their investments grow over time. All of this adds up to a retirement savings system that is stronger today than it has ever been, at least for those who are in it. Now, I do not want to paint an overly rosy picture, because that would not be honest. There are real concerns, and they matter. Let's start with the Government Accountability Office. The GAO has reported that as of 2022, about half of households with a worker age 55 or older had no retirement savings, and 32% had neither retirement savings nor a defined benefit pension. That is a significant portion of older Americans who are approaching retirement with essentially no private savings. For these households, Social Security will be their primary, and in many cases only, source of income. The Federal Reserve's report also found that only 35% of non-retired adults feel their retirement savings are on track, and 14% of non-retirees had either borrowed from, cashed out, or reduced contributions to their retirement accounts in the past 12 months due to economic hardship. The EBRI Retirement Confidence Survey for 2026 found that worker confidence fell 6 percentage points from the previous year, down to 61%. Retiree confidence also declined, down 5 points to 73%. 65% of workers said debt is a problem for their household. Nearly 3 in 5 workers said healthcare costs are hurting their ability to save. And 7 in 10 workers are concerned that rising housing costs will affect their retirement. So, to be absolutely clear, the concerns are real. The pressure is real. And there is a segment of the population that is genuinely at risk of financial hardship in retirement. But here is the nuance that often gets lost in the headline. Being worried about running out of money and actually running out of money are two very different things. The data shows us that the majority of retirees, even those who were worried beforehand, end up managing financially once they are actually retired. The Federal Reserve found that 82% of retirees are doing okay or living comfortably. EBRI found that 73% of retirees remain confident in their financial situation. And research on actual retiree spending patterns shows that most people naturally adjust their spending to match their income, which means the money tends to last. Let me take a step back and give you some context on how we arrived at this situation, because it helps explain why the fear is so widespread, even when the reality is more positive. A few decades ago, most American workers had what is called a defined benefit pension. This is a pension where your employer guarantees you a specific monthly payment for life after you retire. You do not have to manage any investments. You just receive a check every month. Over the last 30 to 40 years, that system largely shifted to defined contribution plans, like the 401k. In this model, the employee is responsible for contributing money, choosing investments, and eventually figuring out how to withdraw it in retirement. The GAO has pointed out that this shift increased the risks and responsibilities for individuals. Now, instead of your employer managing your retirement income, you have to do it yourself, and most people are not trained financial planners. This shift is a big reason why people feel anxious. The responsibility moved from institutions to individuals, and that feels scary. When you are the one making the decisions, every market downturn feels personal. But here is the other side of that story. The defined contribution system has been improving. Automatic enrollment, automatic escalation, target date funds, and employer matching have made it easier for people to save without having to be financial experts. Vanguard's 25 years of data show that plan design improvements have driven participation from 65% to 86%, and savings rates to all-time highs. The system is far from perfect, but it is getting better. So what does all of this mean for you, whether you are already retired or still planning for it? Let me separate the confirmed impacts from the possible ones. Confirmed. If you are already retired, the data suggests you are likely doing better financially than you may have expected. You are probably spending less than you planned, and your multiple income sources are working together to keep you stable. Confirmed. If you are still working and participating in a 401k or similar plan, the system is more supportive than it was a decade ago. Automatic features are helping you save more, and professional management is helping you invest more wisely. Confirmed. Social Security will continue to pay benefits even after the trust funds are depleted, though at a potentially reduced level if Congress does not act. Possible. If Congress takes action before 2034, which both AARP and the Brookings Institution are pushing for, the reduction could be avoided entirely or minimized significantly. This is a political question, not a mathematical certainty. Possible. If you are in the group that has no retirement savings, which the GAO says is about half of households age 55 and older, then your situation is more vulnerable. For you, Social Security is not just a supplement, it is the foundation. And that means staying informed about any policy changes is critical. Possible. Healthcare costs in retirement remain the biggest wild card. The EBRI survey found that 2 in 5 retirees said healthcare expenses were higher than expected. This is the one area where running out of money is a more realistic concern, particularly for those with significant medical needs later in life. So let's talk about why the fear of running out of money is so much bigger than the actual reality. Part of it is psychological. When you are saving for decades, watching every dollar, and then suddenly you have to start spending those dollars, it feels like you are going backwards. Every withdrawal feels like a loss, even when it is exactly what the money was saved for. Michael Kitches and other researchers have documented this phenomenon. They call it the decumulation paradox. People who were excellent savers often struggle to become spenders. They have spent 30 years training themselves to accumulate, and switching to distribution mode feels wrong. Part of it is media-driven. Headlines about the Social Security Trust Fund running out, about the retirement crisis, about people working into their 70s, these stories get clicks. And they are not false, but they often present the worst-case scenario without the full context. For example, when you hear Social Security will be depleted in 2034, you rarely hear that depleted means 83% of benefits still being paid, not zero. When you hear about the retirement savings crisis, you rarely hear that 82% of current retirees are doing okay financially. And part of it is simply human nature. We are wired to worry about the future. It is how we survive. But sometimes that worry outpaces the actual risk. Now, I do not want to leave you with just analysis. Let me give you some practical takeaways. First, if you are still working, make sure you are participating in your employer's retirement plan. If your plan has automatic enrollment, you may already be in. But check your contribution rate. Vanguard's data shows the average is 12.1%. If you are below that, consider increasing, especially if your employer offers a match. Second, do not panic about Social Security. It is not going to disappear. But do stay informed about any congressional action, because changes could affect your benefits. AARP, the Social Security Administration, and the GAO all provide regular updates. Third, If you are retired or close to retiring, understand that it is normal to spend less as you age. Do not force yourself to follow a rigid withdrawal rate if your actual expenses are lower. Many retirees find that their required spending drops significantly after the first few years. Fourth, healthcare is the one area where you should plan conservatively. The EBRI survey showed that nearly half of workers and retirees have not calculated how much they will need for healthcare in retirement. Do not be in that group. Even a rough estimate is better than no plan at all. And fifth, if you are not sure where to turn for guidance, you are not alone. EBRI found that more than 2 in 5 workers and 1/4 of retirees do not know where to go for retirement planning advice. Consider working with a professional financial advisor if you can, and look for one who acts as a fiduciary, meaning they are legally required to put your interests first. Let me bring this all together. The fear of running out of money in retirement is understandable, and it is widespread. 61% of workers are not confident, according to EBRI's 2026 survey. That is a majority feeling uncertain. But the actual data tells a more balanced story. 82% of retirees are doing okay or living comfortably, according to the Federal Reserve. 73% of retirees remain confident, per EBRI. Research shows that retiree spending naturally decreases over time, and many retirees do not even spend their principal. Social Security, even under worst-case projections, would still pay the majority of scheduled benefits. And the defined contribution system is stronger than it has ever been, with record participation and savings rates. Does this mean no one runs out of money? No. There are real gaps, particularly for households with no savings and for those facing high healthcare costs. Those challenges deserve attention and policy solutions. But for the majority of Americans, the question is not whether you will run out of money. The question is whether you will allow fear to prevent you from actually enjoying the retirement you worked hard to build. That is the real story behind the headline. Quick disclaimer. This video is for informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Everyone's financial situation is different. Please consult with a qualified financial professional before making decisions about your retirement. All data referenced in this video comes from official government and institutional sources, which are listed below. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to subscribe to Federal Benefit Guide. We take complex benefit and retirement topics and break them down using real data from official sources. No hype, no fear-mongering, just facts you can actually use. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss an update, and if you have a question about Social Security, Medicare, or retirement planning that you would like us to cover, drop it in the comments below. I am Norix Hale, and I will see you in the next video. Take care and plan smart.